Joe Tipton of On 3. Hey, Joe, welcome back. Always great to chat. Thanks for hopping on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me.
All right, Joe. So we saw you there with next Syracuse player Sadique White last Wednesday night on the YouTube stream. In your view, what is Syracuse getting in a couple of years when Sadique shows up?
A really high upside prospect. Sadique has really good size. Is 6'8", moves incredibly well. Very ultra athletic guy. A high flyer that really thrives in transition. A big time lob threat as well. He's the kind of a guy that will wow you with what he can do in the air, and he's also capable of stepping out and knocking down the three ball with his feet set. I really like this pickup for Syracuse.
Yeah, it's something, Joe. You start reading about this guy, and you heard him talk on your stream last week. You don't often hear high school kids overtly committed to defense, right? He seems like he's ready to go out and guard everybody on the court, which is I don't feel that's something you normally hear from 17-year-old kids getting ready for college.
No, yeah, you're exactly right. As you know, a lot of these youngsters they're more worried about scoring the ball, but Sadique is a guy who is very much so, like you mentioned, locked in on the defensive end, very long arms. Like I said, moves just so well, able to slide his feet, very versatile on the defensive end and able to switch on to guards as well.
So that'll be a great addition for the class of 2025. He was number 1 for Syracuse. But around here, as I'm sure you are aware, all eyes are on Kiyan Anthony and what he's going to do. You put out there yesterday the list of official visits he's planning on making at some point with Indiana and Auburn and Ohio State. I think a lot of us still think he's headed to Syracuse. So what's your view on Kiyan and everything that's swirling around him right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Spoke to Kiyan, and he was looking at taking those three visits sometime during the month of September. I still firmly believe that Syracuse is the leader in this recruitment. I watched Kiyan play just a couple of weekends ago in Indianapolis, and it was the first game of the live evaluation period, meaning that the first time this spring for AAU ball that college coaches were able to watch players in person, and the only head coach for game 1 for Kiyan was Syracuse head coach Red Autry, and that told me a lot. Now, as this weekend went on, I saw Mike Woodson there. You see other assistants there, Bruce Pearl looking on as well. I'm sure there were others that I missed, but for him to be front and center on night 1, day 1, that told me a whole lot.
That's telling in a lot of ways. What does that tell you about what Red's doing here? Because we go back to last year, and he gets the job. Syracuse was already recruiting him in heavily, but he was not locked in his coming here until after Red was hired and Donnie Freeman. Now Sadique White. Now you see Red front and center going after Kiyan Anthony. What does this tell you about Red Autry and what he's going to do out there as a head coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's very much so locked in on the recruiting front. This tends to happen with assistants that eventually take over the reins as head coach. A lot of the job as an assistant coach is to go out and acquire talent, and he is used to spearheading the recruitments of high-level prospects, and he showed it with landing Donnie Freeman, the top 10 player in the class. That'll be a freshman this season. Of course, Sadique White, and now Kiyan Anthony, who's a top 30 recruit as well. So I think it says a lot about him as a player that he's really focused on bringing in some of the cream of the crop from the high school ranks.
When we look at Kiyan here, obviously because Melo went to Syracuse, it feels to me, Joe, and tell me if you feel different, that I think Kiyan's a really good player. Obviously, he'd fit wherever he wants to go. He's going to be a good player wherever he goes. It almost feels more important for Syracuse to get him than for an Indiana or an Auburn to get him. Does it feel the same way to you that this would be a really important get just because it's Melo's kid and the whole tie to it?
Yes, absolutely. I think it would be, and it goes without saying, I think it would be incredibly disappointing for Syracuse fans, the Syracuse staff, if they're not able to land him, and even just basketball fans outside of, Indiana, maybe some of the other schools that are firmly in the mix recruiting him, but just college basketball fans at large. How great would it be to see, 20 years later, Melo, who won a championship, and what was it, 04?
03.
03, 20 years later, his son joins the orange as well. So it would be really neat to see. But it definitely feels like this is a player that Syracuse needs to lock up, and it would make a huge, it would be a huge statement play for Coach Autry in his early tenure.
All right, Joe. I mean, setting aside the fact that he is Carmelo's kid, what kind of player is Kiyan? Like, what would Syracuse be looking at if they got him? What kind of basketball does he put out there?
He's a player that's rapidly improving. From when I saw him last summer to this summer, he's getting more and more confident. He's getting a lot stronger each and every time that I see him. I think he might be still growing as well. And I think he's listed about 6'4", 6'5", but he is a guy that can just go out and get you a bucket. He's a scoring guard, a really good shooter, got good positional size as well. It can also, dribble and create a little bit as well. But I think the main thing for him is just to continue to get stronger, and then for his confidence to keep growing, and it has tremendously just this summer, this spring alone.
I'd say still growing would be in the genes. This is right around the age where Melo shot up from like a 6'2" point guard to the 6'8" guy that he became in college and the pros, as we got Joe Tipton of On 3 with us. So there's Sadique White, there's Kiyan Anthony. Obviously, Cuse is after more guys than that. A name which I'm learning more and more about here this afternoon, Joe, is London Jemison, who's definitely rocketed up your On 3 rankings of late. The percentage is very high, almost 90% of him coming to Syracuse. What's this guy, and how in on hhim is Syracuse right now?
Yeah, I definitely think that they're firmly in the mix for London Jemison. He is about a 6'7", 6'8", kind of a stretch 4. Really another high upside play as well. But he is also a guy that's racked in a bunch of offers. Syracuse was on him early. I think they hosted him for an official visit back in January. So, but since he's picked up offers from, Alabama, Georgetown, Washington, so he's got a lot of other schools. I think he's going to continue to explore the recruitment process, probably take a handful of more visits before he comes to make a decision. But he is definitely a target for Syracuse.
Okay, so there's a name to watch, Joe. Another name that people were asking me about today is Tyler Jackson, a kid from Baltimore, a combo point guard type. Is this a guy Syracuse is legit in on, and what kind of guy is he?
Yes, absolutely. They're in the mix for him as well. He's actually a good friend of Kiyan Anthony, plays for Team Melo. Of course, Carmelo's sponsored AAU team on the EYBL circuit. They play together, so they're good friends. He's about a top 35 guard. He plays at Overtime Elite in Atlanta, but he's a very quick twitch, high energy guard, kind of maybe around a little slender, 6'1", but he can really make plays with the ball in his hands. He's also a great shot taker and maker as well. I think any Syracuse fans, if you look him up, you might like what you see.
All right, so some names to watch out there for the class of 2025. And, Joe, you obviously do a lot of stuff with the transfer portal as well and all this. How have you noticed all this in the last 2-3 years, like the balance of high school recruiting versus transfer portal, and obviously the COVID guys are phasing out? How have you noticed this all changing here in the last, year and a half? And where do you think it's settling of schools going at the portal versus schools going at these high school kids?
Yeah, absolutely. I think prior to NIL and prior to the one-time transfer rule, many college programs, their focus was in high school recruiting, but then there's been a shift now with so many players on the move, and just the impact that transfers can make. Common sense suggests you take the 21-year-old who is proven and at the college level, rather than taking a chance on a young guy coming into high school. And of course, teams are still recruiting high school talent, and they still need high school talent to build through their program and build their culture, which I'm a huge fan of. It's kind of, upsetting sometimes to see so much roster turnover year in and year out. And it's really hard to build a culture, in my opinion, that way, just off these 1 year, they're just kind of like 1 year rentals in a way, with just the player coming in for a year and then reevaluating at the end of the season. But I think there'll be a little bit less high school talent taken each year just because of the portal is so fruitful. And I believe it'll continue to be that way as well. And but the high school players will still be a priority.
Yeah, I say it's hard to remember who's on what team when you get to the portal stuff at points with everybody moving around. Joe, this I'll see if you agree because you probably see more of the numbers on this. Are you noticing like incoming class sizes of freshmen in basketball are going down? I mean, you think in the past you get 4 or 5 guys in a class and you say, yeah, that's about right. Now it seems like that's too many. Like they're not going to play and they're all going to leave. Are you seeing incoming class sizes going down on average across the board?
Yes, absolutely. It probably cut in half. Even you look at a team like Syracuse only bringing in, I believe, 2 freshmen.
Yeah, just 2. It's just Donnie Freeman and Elijah Moore, and that's it coming in this year.
Right, and then they bring in, 3 transfer guys, and maybe still after, I think you touched on Justin Taylor as well, who I'm told they're in good position with. So I do think I have noticed the trend of the high school classes shrinking now. I also think once this COVID year phases out, these guys that are playing their 5th and 6th year of college basketball, this will eventually come to an end.
Yes.
And then once that comes to an end, of course, by default, you will need more talent. So I think the high school, it might have an uptick. But when I talk to college coaches and I ask them, hey, how many high school guys do you think you're taking? And 90% of the time, the answer is between 2 and 3.
Okay, yeah, and obviously Syracuse, at least for this year, they got 2 coming in. Next year, Sadique White hoping for Kiyan Anthony, maybe 1 more, and we'll see where that goes. So we got Joe Tipton of On 3 with us. And, Joe, you would definitely know this because you obviously, you're doing the graphics for a lot of these guys. You get the heads up on a lot of this stuff. My sense this year compared to last, and then really, go back further than that in the portal, it's almost pointless to compare, is that the portal moved a little more patiently this year, a little slower, both on the players and on the school side. And then obviously you get the proposals out there of maybe waiting a week to start it next year, not having it last this long. Do you feel that it's going a little bit slower just because people are not feeling as necessary? They got to sprint in the first week to get stuff done these days?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because it really just depends on the player, and I think a lot of it depends on who is advising the player as well. You'll notice a lot of players, of course, this year there was a 45-day window in which players could enter their name into the portal, and you saw several players enter their name in the final hours, in the final day to capitalize on potential NIL opportunities. It's some agents kind of advising players, hey, it's may be best to be one of the few high-quality players versus going in on the first couple days of the portal and looking like everybody else. Because once that portal dries up, programs, especially the high major level, are extremely desperate, and you think about some leftover dollars that they might have in their NIL bank that they are able to supply to those guys that come in really late. But in terms of the process, with a lot of the players that I work with, it moves quickly for the most part. The majority of the time, the players are committing, sometimes even sight unseen, to a college just because they feel comfortable. And, to be quite honest, the NIL money is right. And so it's interesting because even deals are struck before players have even entered the portal. And, of course, that's, not legal, but that's just the way the system works now, is that a lot of these players are kind of already set up to attend a different school before officially entering their name into the portal. So the high school process is much slower. You see these high school guys, they take 5 official visits. They set a commitment date. They have this special celebration. So it's great for guys like us to track because you're able to kind of track each stop of the bus. But with the portal, you just wake up one day and Eddie Lampkin's committing to Syracuse, and you're like, oh, didn't see this coming, but great, awesome. So that's just kind of the way these things sometimes tend to unfold.
Yeah, I'd say with the Eddie Lampkin, where it's like we heard he was on the plane and the deal was done basically at the same time. It's like, how about that? And then we had a very weird saga with him in the last few weeks, and now he's still here. You know what? The proposal now here, Joe, to bump back the portal a week to after the Sweet 16 gets set. It ideally, right? It seems like a good idea in the ideal world, but you mentioned the tampering. Is the tampering that week going to be just so overwhelming? It's pointless to bump it back. What do you think that would be like if they bump back the start of the portal?
I think it will make some of a difference, especially to those that are honest. Of course, tampering exists no matter what you do,
right.
in my opinion, because there's tampering being done in January. So there's no really, to me, I think there is more of a benefit just to push it back, just so coaches don't have to do legal recruiting while in the NCAA tournament, because you hear about these college coaches all the time complaining, hey, I'm getting set to play in the round of 32 or in the Sweet 16, and I'm having to call this transfer kid because I know I'm losing my point guard to graduation, and I need him because he's a local talent, and we love him as a player and all this. So I do think that there will be benefits to pushing it back, and I'm actually a fan of the move as well. So I like it.
Yeah, I'd say ideally it's a great idea, but you're right, the tampering. We spent much of February hearing Judah Mintz was going to play for Georgetown. Obviously, none of that came to pass, but I'm sure there was probably some smoke to the fire, as there often is. All right, Joe, thanks as always. Great to chat. We'll be looking forward to hopefully you having a Kiyan Anthony Cuse graphic at some point in our future. We'll have to do this again soon, all right? Thanks for hopping on.
All right, appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
There is Joe Tipton of On 3. Yeah, Joe. We're hoping we see a Joe Tipton, Kiyan Anthony graphic. Though if I know anything about, and we love having Joe on, he does the graphics, and he had Sadique White on his announcement there last week. Somehow it feels like Kiyan's announcement may be slightly more elaborate than a graphic, just based on mellow and videos and reality shows and the whole thing. Somehow I feel like Kiyan Anthony announcement might have just a wee bit of pomp and circumstance to it. But hopefully we get to see that sooner than later. But again, official timetable on that? No. And hopefully it's Syracuse. But we don't know. With that, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll get Mike in here. We'll do a little 411. We'll do that next year on Q Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.